Our top focus on the show, Putin is getting what he wants. Since his hour-long call with US President Donald Trump on Thursday, Europe and Ukraine have been thrown into turmoil, pushing back against comments coming out of Washington, D.C. They are reeling from the Trump administration's statements. Well, Trump's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has warned NATO allies to spend more on Europe's defense and not turn Uncle Sam into Uncle Sucker. He has ruled out NATO membership for Ukraine and dismissed the possibility of restoring all of Ukraine's lost territory. To put it simply, Putin is getting exactly what he has long wanted. And all of this, they all are a big win for Russia, if you're wondering how. Because all pretense of Ukraine's sovereignty and its right to negotiate its own future disappeared the moment Trump phoned Putin and seemingly conceded to most of Russia's demands. And that's even before formal talks to end the war began. A great collision has begun, and this is just the start. On Friday, French President Emmanuel Macron warned against a peace deal over Ukraine war that would amount to capitulation. In an interview with the Financial Times, Macron said that it would be up to Ukraine to discuss issues of territory and sovereignty, and insisted that Europe has a role to play in regional security. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer affirmed that Ukraine was on an irreversible path to NATO membership. Starmer said this to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in a phone call. Now, these statements just expose the growing rift between Europe and the US, and that is over Ukraine's future. European leaders fear that Trump and Putin are negotiating Europe's security architecture over their heads. They believe Trump has already handed Putin several concessions, and the discomfort is both obvious and unsurprising. After all, for nearly 8 decades, Europe has depended on the US for its defense. Now, that entire arrangement seems to be at risk. Zelensky is worried too. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference on Friday, the Ukrainian president warned that Russia could attack NATO as early as next year. And that's if the West does not provide firm security guarantees. He has been pushing for such guarantees to be a part of any potential peace deal. And of course, Europe has every reason to be concerned. Russia is a nuclear-armed state. Europe, meanwhile, relies heavily on the US nuclear umbrella. So far, there's been no talks of withdrawing that protection. But many European nations see America's continued military protection as essential for their survival. The question is, can Europe defend itself without American cover? Observers say that Europe is not moving fast enough to find that out. On Friday, NATO chief Mark Rutte admitted the same.
Can I be very honest about my European friends? I really believe what Europeans have to do now is to come up with the concrete plans. One, to get more military aid to Ukraine.
And so, as Europe grapples with the possibility of America's abandonment, it's Putin who is having the last laugh. Trump, the self-proclaimed deal maker, has publicly suggested that Russia should keep some of the Ukrainian territory it has seized. After 3 years of war, the American president has also suggested that Ukraine will not join NATO, the trigger to the 3-year-old war altogether. All this is exactly what Putin wants to hear. But there is more. Trump has also ruled out sending US troops to Ukraine. He's insisted that any European peacekeeping force must not operate under NATO banner. So that means that the US would not be obligated to intervene, even if that force is attacked. Yet, despite his reluctance to defend Ukraine, Trump seems eager to cut a deal for Ukraine's rare earth minerals, the rare earth materials. They are important to American high-tech industries. And so, even before the talks begin, Putin has secured another long-standing demand: direct negotiations with Washington, D.C. without Ukraine. Or is European allies at the table on terms that only suit Moscow. Meanwhile, his forces continue to advance on Ukraine's battlefield. Putin's decision to double down on his war objectives appears to be paying off. Moscow has already dismissed Zelensky's recent offer, which included a proposed land swap. Moscow has circled back to its real demands, which are number one, Ukraine's disarmament, number two, an end to Western military aid to Ukraine, and thirdly, a pro-Russia stance enshrined in Ukraine's constitution, with Ukraine struggling to sustain the fight with Russia's military. And Moscow is in no mood to compromise on any of these three demands. The big question is, what kind of deal can Trump secure for Ukraine? We'll have to wait and watch. As for Europe, the clock is ticking and Uncle Sam is open for serious business.